I can't really tell when my fascination with Buenos Aires began, but I know it was a long time ago.
Have you ever dreamt of a place for so long that when you're finally there, you find yourself on the verge of tears? Well, I have.
I had dreamed of visiting the city for nearly 20 years, and when I finally booked my flights, I was worried I wouldn't like it. Instead, Buenos Aires turned out to be everything I expected, and much more. My first impression of Buenos Aires was that of a European city that somehow found itself stranded 10,000 kilometers away from Europe. This is by far the most European city I've seen in the Americas. A refined, progressive and cosmopolitan metropolis with lush parks, manic traffic, imposing architecture, great food and a unique cultural heritage. I always like to start my visit to a city with a prominent landmark, in this case the famous Casa Rosada, the executive mansion of the Argentinian president. Today's incarnation of the building is the result of two constructions being joined together by means of a monumental arch built by Italian architect Francesco Tamburini in 1884. The building is beautiful, inside and out. You can visit the Casa Rosada every Saturday by registering online, and I definitely recommend you do. You get to discover a truly impressive building, peek into the president's office, and live your Evita fantasy by walking the same corridors and staircases the First Lady did.
So I wanted to come to Buenos Aires for a long time, since the 90s. Since the moment I saw Madonna's Evita. And if you recognize those balconies behind me, one of them is the one from which Madonna, or Evita, used to address the crowds.
Stunning Plaza de Mayo, or Plaza de Mayo, if you want to pronounce it in the Argentinian way, is the historical heart of Buenos Aires. It's right in front of the Casa Rosada. Here, you will find the Catedral Metropolitana and the Cabildo, the former home of the colonial government and now an interesting museum that will teach you a lot about how the independence of Argentina and much of South America was achieved. As a European, I was ashamed of how little I know about heroic figures like Belgrano or San Martin, or the May Revolution, which led to the destitution of the Spanish viceroy, and ultimately to the liberation of Argentina, Peru, and Chile. Walk down Avenida de Mayo and take in the beautiful architecture all around you. Stop for a coffee at historical Café Tortoni and you could swear you have stepped back in time to 1910 Paris or Milan. Keep going past the impossibly busy Avenida 9 de Julio. With its 140 meters, this is the widest street in the world, and it is impossible to cross it in one go. Continue down Avenida de Mayo for a few more minutes until you reach Palacio Barolo. This was one of the highlights of my stay in Buenos Aires. Palacio Barolo, inaugurated in 1923, was designed by architect Mario Palanti, whose obsession with Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy led to the creation of something of a concept building. Palacio Barolo brings together the practical elements of your everyday office building and the symbolism and allegory from the famous literary work. So you have 3 sections to the building, as in the Inferno, Purgatory and Heaven, 100 meters in height, as in the 100 cantos of the comedy, 9 elevators, Dante organized both the Inferno and Heaven in 9 circles, and many more symbols. Join one of the tours to discover this unique building and make sure you go all the way up to the glass tower. It contains a lighthouse and the views are breathtaking. From up here, you get a sense of just how big Buenos Aires is. Also, this is where you're likely going to spot the Rio de la Plata for the very first time, in the distance. Minutes from Palacio Barolo, at the end of Avenida de Mayo, lies the majestic Palacio de Congreso. This neoclassical building is known for its 80-meter green dome towering above the area. The square in front of the Congress is traditionally where demonstrations take place. And sure enough, when I first came here on a late afternoon in September, there was a gathering of women from the Comando Evita celebrating the 72nd anniversary of the law that gave Argentinian women the right to vote, commonly known as Ley Evita, or Evita Law, in reference to the great contribution of Evita Peron to the cause. As polarizing as Peronism is in the country, there is no doubt that the figure of Evita is still very important to many Argentinians, nearly 70 years after her death. If you want to pay your respects, head to the monumental cemetery of Recoleta, where Evita was laid to rest, next to notable Argentinian writers, generals, and presidents. The cemetery is the perfect place to escape the hustle and bustle of the city and take a quiet stroll surrounded by beautifully decorated mausoleums. So we're in the cemetery of Recoleta, which is considered like an open-air museum, and behind me is the tomb of Evita. Don't just come to Recoleta for the cemetery, though. This neighborhood, with its distinct Parisian feel, houses a renowned cultural center, the Faculty of Law of the Buenos Aires University with its spectacular colonnade, and the Floralis Generica, a giant steel and aluminum flower by Eduardo Catalano that opens during the day and closes at night. Don't miss the Ateneo Grand Splendid, a theater turned into a bookstore. If you're a bookworm, however, your best bet is Avenida Corrientes. This long, busy street is lined with bookstores and is where porteños come to buy their next read. Where Avenida Corrientes meets Avenida 9 de Julio, you will find the famous obelisk. Another Buenos Aires landmark, it was built in 1936 to commemorate the 400 years since the first foundation of the city. It's also the place where the national flag was hoisted for the first time in 1812. Come here for your next Instagrammable shot and to visit the famous Teatro Colón. I had read about the diverse architecture of Buenos Aires, but I didn't expect feeling in a different city each time I turned a corner. The stately buildings lining the avenues of Recoleta immediately transported me to Paris. The gorgeous modern skyline of Puerto Madero could be a cutout of the Toronto waterfront. There are even nods to 1930s New York, like the Art Deco Kavanaugh building. This incredible mix reflects itself in the character of the Argentines, whom Mexican writer Octavio Paz once described as Italians who speak Spanish and think they're English. I'm not sure I see much of the English in the Argentinians, but there is no arguing that the Spanish and the Italians had a huge impact on Argentinian culture. As an Italian, I felt at home in Buenos Aires from the very first second, especially after I sat down to eat. Milanesa, pasta, pizza, so much of what the Argentinians eat is a delicious New World adaptation of Italian dishes. And then the meat. It may not be Italian, but don't even think of traveling to Buenos Aires and not having some. The area with the strongest Italian influence is, without a doubt, La Boca. This is where the first immigrants from Italy arrived, many of them from Genoa, to the point that locals were nicknamed Zenesi, Genoese. Immigrants lived in so-called conventiccios, simple dwellings where families share bathrooms and kitchens, painted in many different colors using whatever spare paint could be found on the ships that were offloading people coming from Europe in search of a better future. Today, La Boca's colorful, almost cartoonish houses are a big draw for tourists, who come here to stroll down El Caminito, visit the famous stadium La Bombonera, and buy souvenirs. The surly notes of tango are heard everywhere in the tourist-filled streets of La Boca. After all, this is one of the places where this fascinating dance originated, in the years between the end of the 1800s and the beginning of the 1900s. Around the city, you can of course find a plethora of tango shows, many of which offer a delightful combo of dinner and performance. Just north of La Boca is charming San Telmo. The best time to visit this area is Sunday, when the awesome Feria de San Telmo fills Plaza Dorrego and spills over into the surrounding streets. Antique sellers, street artists, and a mix of locals and tourists make this an incredibly lively area. This is the best place to catch a tango show or a milonga in the open air. Tango really is danced on the streets in Buenos Aires, and what an incredible show it is. As the oldest neighborhood in the city, San Telmo is also home to a large number of colonial buildings. Together with the cobblestone streets, they're sure to take you back to a bygone era. Cap your Sunday off with a drink at the busy Mercado de San Telmo with its elegant cast iron and glass ceiling. Getting bored in Buenos Aires is simply impossible, and the city's calendar is packed full of events year-round. There are also several museums you can choose from. Among them, I would recommend the Malba, a celebration of Latin American art from Botero to Frida Kahlo, and the Centro Cultural Kirchner, steps away from the Casa Rosada, which hosts interesting exhibitions and boasts some impressive design and architectural elements. If cool is what you want, head over to Palermo, a massive neighborhood that's become Buenos Aires' hippest area. To give you an idea, its most popular sections are known as Palermo Soho and Palermo Hollywood. This area of low-rise buildings, amazing restaurants, trendy bars, and a million shops really comes alive after dark. And on weekends, when Plaza Armenia and Plaza Serrano turn into fantastic open-air markets.
I fell in love with Buenos Aires. I've always felt drawn to this place, and now that I experienced it, that connection is even stronger.
I knew I was going to like Buenos Aires. What I didn't know is that I would be falling head over heels with this city, with its streets, with its noise, with its ever-changing looks, more than anything with its people.